We are chilling. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Decode Podcast. This is our
last episode.
Our last episode of the year.
What?
And yeah, it is.
Yeah, we're not doing next week, right?
No.
Okay.
So we're going to end with our
Game of the year.
Game of the year. We're doing things a little bit differently. I know normally we've put out a full video for Game of the Year. But what's going to happen is we're going to record it live as part of the podcast. And our top 10 picks is what's going to be kind of segmented from the video on demand on this one. And that will eventually be thrown on our YouTube for our top 10.
I hate that they're called video on demand.
They're VODs, I know.
I don't like that because it's just like, it's on the internet. It's always on demand. Like,
at least for 48 hours or something like that.
2 weeks.
So we're going to have our top 10 be what we're going to cap the show off with. Before that, we're going to go over some of our honorable mentions because there's a lot of games that came out this year that I think get recognition. The honorable mentions for this particular episode is the only thing that kind of falls into categories. So we have 5 different categories. Each of them is we're going to go over certain games that fit that category, and our pick for the main one of that will make like the top 15 essentially. But there's just a lot of games that have come out this year that all deserve some type of mention or recognition. We're going to acknowledge those games, put them in a little bit of a placement, then go into our top 10 with our number 1 game being our game of the year. We're going to go over a bunch of honorable mentions first. We're going to talk about some games that didn't make the list, why they didn't. And then we're going to go into our honorable mentions, and then we're going to go into our top 10. One of the things that I want you all to keep in mind is that this year, we said it plenty of times on our podcast, the very theme for this year, especially with how the industry went throughout this year, we felt like the theme was everything old is new again.
And you want to know, I just relived the GameCube era. That's basically what we relived through.
Yeah, like this year was basically like the next-gen GameCube era. So we're going to go over a couple of games. These are games that we considered putting onto the main list, but at the end of the day, we just realized
they lacked something.
They lacked something, too divisive, or they just didn't feel right putting it in the list with the rest of the games that we put on this list. So right off the bat, unfortunately, Dave the Diver didn't make this, and for one big reason, it was an indie game that wasn't an indie game.
Yeah.
And it was just okay. The game wasn't.
It was one of those flavor of the month games. Like I've played it. It's a good game.
Yeah.
It's one of those games I'll go relax to, but I don't think it really. I would say Dredge pulled the real fishing thing
for sure
a bit more.
Yeah. The Resident Evil 4 remake's another one that didn't make the list, mostly because this game has been remade into death at this point, and there wasn't anything new with this remake outside of the graphical facelift.
Outside of the graphical facelift, some of the story changes.
Yeah, I mean, they fixed the continuity a little bit.
I will say this, though. The camp was all there, so I'm looking forward to 5's remake. Because I want to see... I'm like, how do you fix that?
Yeah.
Capcom?
And besides, there was another survival horror remake that kind of did things a little bit better. We'll get to that in just a little bit. The elephant in the room of games that didn't make our list, the Mortal Kombat 1...
Listen, if Mortal Kombat 1, I think this is more about WB just as a whole. Is. I am not even going to blame NetherRealms because I feel like NetherRealms wanted to put the game in the oven for a bit longer. I don't think they wanted to release it this year.
It really feels like they didn't. Like Ed Boon feels like he had his hands tied and he was at the mercy of WB executives.
Yeah, and we have to compete with Capcom. I was like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
You literally could have released after Tekken 8 and you have still made it for EVO.
Mm-hmm. So, Mortal Kombat 1 didn't make our list. These next two kind of go hand in hand because they were much anticipated games, but the overall consensus was that these games weren't all that. And we're, of course, talking about both The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and Starfield, which, for lack of better terms, both came across as very mid. Tears of the Kingdom couldn't escape the fact that, like, knowing that it was a DLC, and then when you play it felt like a DLC. It didn't feel like a full game.
Yeah. I would have rather Tears of the Kingdom be episodic DLC, in all honesty, for Breath of the Wild, instead of being a sequel game. But I understand why Nintendo went this way. I will say this: thank you for the lore.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, thank you for the lore.
It was nice to get some backstory. It's cool. Yeah. I just don't think it was worth the $70.
No, I don't think it was worth the $70 either. Starfield feels like the game was started development at the same time as Skyrim. And probably should have released the year after Skyrim.
Probably.
Because I sat here like, this is Skyrim in space.
It's basically Skyrim in space. There's nothing really...
And it's the same engine, too.
There's nothing really innovative about it either, too. Glad that Xbox finally got an exclusive under its belt, but...
No, it's fine. In my opinion, that's fine. I think that's the real win here. It's like, hey, look, we have one.
You had one. But out of these games, obviously, like, if we could pick one that would have made this list, it probably would have been Starfield. But unfortunately, a lot of these other games were just better.
Yeah.
So we're going to go into our actual honorable mentions. And, of course, because we love indie games right now, we're going to start off with some awesome indie sensations that came out this year. We're just going to go through this sort of like a checklist way, but not really an indie sensation, but just something that was cute and simple. BattleBit Remastered was the Battlefield game we didn't get this year, but we got this year.
Yeah,
and we should have.
We should have.
And it's basically like a PlayStation 1 era Battlefield.
I love it.
Complete with pixelated polygon stuff. And it is fantastic.
It's fantastic. The tank controls are great. Vehicle controls are great. I just love it. It's just like, yo, go into a game and run with it.
Yeah, so BattleBit Remastered, awesome game, highly recommended. Bomb Rush Cyberpunk was a nice love letter to the Jet Set Radio games.
So much so that Sega brought it back, so that's why I'm happy about it.
That's why I'm happy that we'll acknowledge this. Definitely want to give a shout out to Pizza Tower for being the Wario Land game we didn't deserve, but we got anyway. Dredge, we already mentioned, was a fantastic fishing game with an awesome story. And there was also this puzzle game called Humanity that came out on the PlayStation Plus, but you can play it on a lot of things. Very touching story, very symbolic, metaphorical story. But of all like the indie sensations, if we had to nominate just one, it would go to Cocoon from the makers of Limbo and Inside. This is just such a unique game. Had a very unique premise where you can collect these orbs, and each orb was a world that you dove into, and you had to. It kind of like had like puzzle solving elements where you went in and out of each orb to go around the different worlds. So our first true honorable mention goes to Cocoon.
Yep.
So congrats to you guys for this amazing award that is given to you by us and us only. In terms sticking with the indie games, these specific games were indie games that basically hit us where it matters most, and that's in the feels. You hit us where it hurts. I want to give these are honorable mentions for all of these games here, but obviously one makes the actual list, so to speak. I want to talk a little bit about Season, A Letter to the Future, which I thought was a very heartfelt game. It's about this character who literally writes letters to herself in the future and to try and change. Like, she gets a glimpse of how her life is going to wind up, so she starts writing letters for her future self to try to change things. And I don't want to give everything away, but
it's good.
It's really good. A Space for the Unbound, another amazing game, full of feels, a very touching story. Viewfinder, one of those artistic games where you can take this picture and you can line it up with the background to continue going through the map. Another one with those metaphorical stories where like the story is told as you play the game, like if you look at the world and you recognize the pictures. But if there was one game that really hits us right here in the kokoro, it would be Venba. And as anyone who is part of any ethnic background, whether you're Hispanic, Black, Arabian, Middle Eastern, anyone from any ethnic background could relate to this story. It's about a family, and it's how they come together through the use of food. And it's got like cooking mini games and stuff like that. But it's really a really touching story of family, the good and the bad of family, and how they come together over food. And if that doesn't pique your curiosity and doesn't let you know how much of getting hit by the feels train thing this game is,
then you should probably immigrate.
You should definitely play Venba. All right. Going along, if we can scroll.
Oh, sorry. Oh, wait, I'm in the wrong.
Yeah, you're there. So going along with the rest of the games, we have our actual first-person goodies. We had some shooters this year. Not all of them were like super amazing, but we wanted to talk about some of the ones that definitely
stood out.
Metroid Prime Remastered was pretty good. You know,
that was great.
It was great. Very simple port, but not enough to really like.
I'll say this: like I sat there, I was like, "Oh, this reminds me when I first got it."
Yeah, like it was really good to play again.
Yeah.
I really liked Immortals of Avium. It's a shame that this game didn't do as well as it did financially. The studio got hit with layoffs. But it's a game I highly recommend. Chances are it's probably like discounted heavily right now.
It's on the Steam sale.
If you're looking for a new shooter that has some interesting take on like Hexen, and if you want some first-person magic, I highly recommend Immortals of Avium. If you're looking for a return to form when it comes to the boomer shooters of old, Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun was amazing.
It had no right being this good.
That game had no right being as good as it is. A special shout out also has to go to RoboCop Rogue City. Just for being a fun game. Like, it's not the most technically polished game.
I'm going to be quite honest with you. It really is. It scratched the itch of the movie tie-in game that I've been missing.
Yeah, like, it fits
There's
right into the
nothing
plots.
wrong with that.
No, not at all. It fits right between RoboCop 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And it's just fun.
Yeah.
Like, the opening moments have the RoboCop theme playing as you shoot gang members in their nether regions. Like, you can't get any better than that.
Or you blow their heads off with, like, it's like my revolver. Boom. Why did he explode?
Yeah. But if there's one shooter that definitely was
the king,
the king, and a true harbinger of everything old is new again, and that's Counter-Strike 2.
Yes.
Like, come on, the shooter to end all be all of all first-person shooters makes our honorable mention list. Because it's just that damn good. Like,
I'm looking at you, Epic. You have Unreal Tournament. You could be on this list again. You could give Counter-Strike the run for their money again.
Yeah.
Not that you would.
Yeah. This year was also slew to a lot of really amazing surprise releases that we kind of looked at it, we're like, oh, this might be good. And then when you play, you're like, oh, this is actually really good. Case in point, Disney Speedstorm dropped this year. Yeah, it's a microtransaction-ridden hellhole of a game, but the game's actually fun, and it's a solid racer. And it's free to play, so, like, can't go wrong with it. I really liked Chia, which was an open-world offering about New Caledonia.
Yeah.
Embraced the culture of the natives that were there. You got to learn about a whole other piece of the country that's out in Australia that you would have never learned about anywhere else. I want to talk a little bit, again, about Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. It's really good Far Cry game.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong. Assassin's Creed Mirage came out of nowhere. I was not expecting this one to be good.
It was good.
I was like, yo, return to form. Everything old is new again, so let's go back to how Assassin's Creed started off, and maybe people will like it. Newsflash.
People love it.
Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. It's Armored Core.
I love all the anger around this game. But I sit here, I was like, oh, so you're just bad at the game.
Yeah.
The recent update, they now added a PvP mode.
Yep.
I'm like, cool. Now we can see who's truly bad at the game.
Yeah. Good luck. But if there was one game that was a big surprise, it was a surprise drop when Microsoft announcement, and it was just one of the best rhythm games ever made this year. And that is Hi-Fi Rush, coming in at our number 2 honorable mention before we get into our top 10. And number 1, because I'm the editor-in-chief in this, and whatever I say goes, this is the best game to finally come out, despite releasing earlier years ago. But we got to give recognition to Cyberpunk 2077 and its Phantom Liberty DLC, which dropped this year.
All the DLCs technically.
Cyberpunk 2077, had this game released in the state it is now, back when it came out,
Game of the Year.
Easily would have been Game of the Year.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that they turned it around and got it into a state where it's extremely playable and it's solid and it works.
The anime and everything also is so good.
Yeah.
The anime update is...
So yeah, Cyberpunk 2077. Congratulations on finally releasing in 2023.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the nitty gritty. This is our top 10 games of 2023. Remember, the theme for this year, everything old is new again, but sometimes even new things can surprise you. And the biggest surprise of this year, coming in at our number 10, is a VR game.
Yep.
And that game is Asgard's Wrath 2, which is a fantastic open world action RPG played entirely in VR. Imagine God of War and like Final Fantasy, and they had a baby. That's pretty much, and it's in VR. Or like, fantastic game. Really puts to show what you can do with virtual reality, and it sucks that like the genre of VR games, like a lot of people are starting to move away from VR, mostly because it's too expensive.
It's the price to get in is slowly coming down.
Yeah. But it feels like it's too little too late at this point. So
But I always said that VR will get its real components once the price starts coming down.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like original PC gaming.
Yep.
Very expensive to get into PC gaming at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You had to buy 3 graphics cards, technically. A 2D, a 3D, and a sound card.
Yeah.
But now, it's kind of cheap to get into it.
Yeah.
So it'll come down.
But yeah, like if you are one of those who are fortunate enough to own an Oculus or any of these VR devices, Asgard's Wrath 2 is definitely worth the price of admission. And it's our number 10 game of 2023. Coming in at number 9 is probably the best remake to come out this year because they remade it from the ground up, and it is such
a spooky
game, and it was so loved that EA even went out of their way to try to hire back most of the team that they let go from Visceral. And of course, we're talking about the Dead Space remake, which
this Star Wars and this are the games that have put EA back on the proper path. Yeah. I feel like
I realized I forgot one of the honorable mentions. Star Wars Jedi Survivor.
Oh yeah, Star Wars Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, that gets thrown into the honorable mentions thing. We'll fix it in post. We're doing this live, guys. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, Dead Space was just phenomenal. This was a remake, and it was such a good remake that you can tell that the team really wanted to do the game's justice.
Yep.
It sold very well. A lot of love went into this. Can't recommend it any higher than what it is. Dead Space is fantastic. Continuing with everything old is new again. We love platformers, and we like when platformers can outdo their own platforming. And in a day and age where every indie developer tries to come out with some new spin on the 2D platform genre, Nintendo, being the sleeping giant that it always is, wakes up and goes, "That's cute. Check this out." And of course, that game is Super Mario Brothers Wonder.
Nintendo wakes up as the sleeping giant. Here you go.
Here you go.
Speaking of this game, have you ever watched the original animation of the Super Mario anime movie?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know who the prince is?
No.
At the very end? It's the Prince of the Flower Kingdom. That's who Princess Peach is supposed to marry.
Really?
His name is the same prince name
from the game.
In this, yeah, they
That's
reused
hilarious.
it. So it was a callback to this movie that Sanrio, by the way, animated. So you see Hello Kitty in the back. I'm like, what is this?
That's hilarious. Super Mario Brothers Wonder was an acid trip of a platformer. It's hard, and it's the good kind of hard.
Yeah, it is the good kind of hard. Yeah.
For those people who really liked Mario Maker and liked playing the hard stages,
watch the speedruns this GDQ coming up.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't wait to see speedruns of this.
Oh, the speedruns for this are going to be insane.
Yeah. But yeah, Super Mario Brothers Wonder coming in at our number 8, and sticking with classic games that are simply amazing. Number 7, the not Chrono Trigger game,
Sea of Stars.
This was such an absolute love letter to the classic old school JRPG.
And turn-based combat.
Turn-based combat that was really addictive to play. A fantastic story that was very reminiscent of the old Chrono Trigger, that feeling you got when you played Final Fantasy VI. Sea of Stars is just an amazing title to play through.
It's so good.
Any other year, this probably could have been a game of the year.
Yeah,
so much good stuff dropped this year, but we had to give it a spot in the top 10 because it is just that good. can't recommend it higher than enough. You know what else was really good? And this is probably, we mentioned surprises in the honorable mentions. This game came out of nowhere. This game, to me, and when I showed it to other people, they kind of agreed that this, to me, was this year's Journey, Abzu. And if you remember how much we loved Grease the year that Grease came out, this is that game. I could compare it to something like Stray, when Stray came out. Like, we were like, oh, the cat game, it might be good. And then you play it and like, oh, this is good. Jusant, coming in at number 6, from Don't Nod, the original developers of Life is Strange. They've done so many phenomenal games. This game was the true definitive taking the trip to the Philippines, because I didn't know where this story was going to go, and when you got to the end, I guess maybe it's kind of a twist, because like you're thinking you're trying to figure out what happened to the civilization, and then the ending kind of like turns that whole adventure on its head, and you're like, oh, this was the point of my whole journey. Wow. Dang. I'm gonna sit here and like hold myself and think about it.
It's like, ooh.
But if you have a chance to play it, please play Jusant. It's such a simple game. It's a rock. You're mountain climbing, but it tells such a very visceral story through the use of imagery, music, everything that you would love. It's just one of those games that really cements that video games are a form of art.
Yep.
We're getting into our top 5 now. And coming in at number 5 is a game that really is about finding your flame, finding that inner strength to continue going on and just be the amazing badass you can be. And that's Final Fantasy May Cry. Final Fantasy 16. I want to know what drugs Square Enix takes when they try something new with their Final Fantasy games.
It's not that. You want to know what it is? It's when they kind of realize that they can lock Nomura in a room so he doesn't have input. I really wish I was joking, because that's the reason why we have Monolith Soft and Psy Games.
Yeah.
All the people are like, all right, Square Enix won't listen to us because they listen to Nomura. Fine, we'll make our own dev studio.
Yeah. So this was a joint project from the developers of Final Fantasy XIV with some people from Capcom, Devil May Cry. They got together and made an amazing Final Fantasy game that is action-packed, has a fantastic story, some of the best cast of characters in a Final Fantasy to date. The DLC dropped, and even the DLC was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I can blabber on and on about how good this game is.
I like how the DLC is paced, too, because it's between technically.
It's between the end of the game and, it takes place, like, right before you get to the end. It's like, oh, here's this last thing we did, by the way.
Yeah.
Totally in continuity. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
But yeah, like just the themes of persevering and continuing on even when you feel like all hope is lost.
Yep.
Final Fantasies are just good for that, and there's nothing bigger than that in this game as well. Final Fantasy 16 is just a phenomenal game. Really changed. I always the reason why I love Final Fantasy is because most Final Fantasies don't try to change what an RPG is. They just try to change like what is Final Fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. And then everyone's like, "Oh, this is how RPGs should be," and it's like, no. Pay attention.
Pay attention. This Final Fantasy can be this all-encompassing thing, and this is another game that falls into the entry because it doesn't really feel like an RPG, even though it has RPG elements. But it also doesn't feel like an action game, even though it does have action game elements. It's like a combination of both, and then you're like, when you play through it, and you're like, this is Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
And I love that about this game. And you know what other game is like that makes our top 10 list and is coming up next in our number 4 spot, that reminds us that, you know what? Fighting games can be freaking cool.
Oh, yeah.
And that's Street Fighter 6. And if you don't think Street Fighter 6 was innovative at all, you were living under a rock and you ignored everything that happened this year in 2023 when it came to this game. One of the biggest games to hit Evo with over, what was it, 9,000 players? 7,000?
Yeah, about around,
Like, broke records. The game shipped with, it was basically 2 games in one. The World Tour mode was the Final Fight game we never got.
Exactly. I sat there, I was like, this is Final Fight. Mike Haggard.
Mike Haggard is the statue in the mayor's office. From its ability to be played by anyone thanks to the modern control scheme.
I am so worried for modern controls Akuma.
Oh, God.
Raging Demon into just... into anything.
And if you don't think modern controls are innovative, you might want to take a look at the Tekken 8 demo because it has modern controls too.
Yeah.
So definitely some inspiration from Capcom being the one to bring it to the fold. But this was just such a video game that it's hard to have it in any other spot than in our top 10. Street Fighter 6, probably one of the best games of this year. And when it came out, at the time that it did come out, I almost wanted this to be Game of the Year.
Yeah.
Just because it was that good.
It was that great.
Yeah. But thankfully, we got these other games that came out, and they made our top 3. So we're up to the podium games, y'all.
Podium.
This is the top 3. Coming in at number 3 is a game so quintessential to gaming in a way. Like, this is only a sequel, and for its genre, it's the best of the best. And of course, we're talking about the superhero genre. And if that isn't a hint to what our number 3 is, we're talking about Spider-Man 2. Plain and simply, the bar for superhero games was here, set by Spider-Man itself when it came out that time ago. And I was like, man, this really beats out like the Arkham games. And then like we had some other superhero games come out, and then Spider-Man 2 was like, that's the bar, cool.
Clears it.
Threw some webs, swung up top, and now it's looking down at everything like this is the new bar. Spider-Man 2 is just such a great superhero game. And it's not only just a great superhero game, it is a fantastic Spider-Man game. Like, it is such a love letter to the character of Spider-Man.
It's funny because both Spider-Man 2 games, the one on the GameCube and PS2,
right,
and this one, are some of the best Spider-Man games.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the ones with twos in them.
Yeah. There are so many amazing moments in this. Like, you can go to anything. Like, Spider-Man did yoga in Central Park.
Yep.
And you can do yoga. And then you have my favorite moment, which was the Grandpa Earl moment.
Grandpa Earl.
Such a heartfelt moment. And it just reminded me how important to the mythos of superheroism
is just
that Spider-Man is.
Yeah, he just does everyday things.
He just does everyday things.
It encapsulated both the amazing Spider-Man, but also the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yes.
Very well.
And again, this is just a testament to how amazing the team Insomniac is.
Yeah.
Like, these guys know how to make good games. All right, so Spider-Man 2 was number 3. This one was a hard one to put at number 2.
So hard.
It was so hard. And just because it's number 2 doesn't mean we don't think it's a bad game. It's just the game that wound up being our game of the year. We decided like this was just more emblematic of
the theme.
Not only just the theme, but also for the industry. And that's something that both these games have in common.
Yeah.
These games really took a hard look at the gaming industry and, for lack of better terms, kind of gave it the finger. So number 2 is Baldur's Gate 3 from Larian Studios. And the reason why this game is number 2 as opposed to our number 1 game, which we'll get to in just a moment, but here's why it's in the top 10 to begin with. Baldur's Gate 3 is literally the opposite of how game development was done, not just in this year, but for most of the generation.
Yeah.
You had so many games come out that were like, oh, we got to be this AAA thing. We got to have microtransactions. We got to charge for this, charge for that, charge, nickel and dime people left, right, front, and center. And Larian Studios was like, we're just going to make a good game. And it's going to be this classic RPG style that people haven't really played for a while. And that's another thing about this game that I want to give it credit for. And I know I've said it on the podcast as well, and I want to reiterate it here while we have a moment here in the top 10. If you remember when Final Fantasy VII came out all those years ago, back in 1997. Before 1997, JRPGs weren't really cool. They were seen as the nerdy genre. And Final Fantasy VII was like, we're going to make JRPGs cool for everyone. And that's something that Baldur's Gate 3 does for the classic RPG genre. Definitely mixed opinions here at Digital Era Entertainment. There are a lot of people who love this game, and then you have some of us, like me, and maybe Gino a little bit, where like, it's good. It's not the best game of the year, but it's good enough to be number 2.
Game of the Year.
But when it came to deciding what our number 1 game of the year would be, I really emphasized 1, everything old is new again. 2, I really wanted it to be a video game-ass video game. And it also had to be something that was another FU to the industry. And I think there's nothing better than giving the industry the middle finger by releasing a sequel to a game that for all intents and purposes failed. Saying, we're going to stick to our own game, we're going to take our stuff back, first of all, and then we're going to make a sequel to it, and we're going to change the genre, and we're going to tell an amazing meta-narrative, we're going to tell this great story, and it's going to tie into this other game that we did that people are now rediscovering or relearning, and they're saying, oh man, this is awesome. And we have to give it our 2023 Game of the Year to Alan Wake 2.
I want more from this team. I really just want more from this team.
I want more from this team. This is a team that has been around for a very long time. They got their start with the Max Payne games back when they were under Rockstar, so much that they're remaking it with Rockstar, like they're remaking the Max Payne games. But just as a game that is emblematic of the industry, we're talking about a studio that has made games that haven't been like that financially successful, but they've been very like niche, very culty. Obviously, the first Alan Wake didn't sell well, but had a cult following that was strong enough that they were able to do
Control,
and then Control was phenomenal, sold well, and that I think Control's success is really what made them go, we can do Alan Wake
2.
And Alan Wake 2 wasn't in development while Control. They've been working on Alan Wake 2 since Alan Wake. And you know, the technology finally got to a spot where
they wanted to use it.
Their vision could be what they wanted it to be. And it's just such a video game that we had no choice but to recognize it as one of the best games of 2023 and our Game of the Year. And that wraps up our show, y'all.
Woo!
Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us across social media for updates. Thanks for watching!